So hello, this week I will be showcasing the behind the scenes for my channel, just the whole process how I typically make a stop motion or even just a regular video. I made a video similar to this like maybe 3 years ago, so it's definitely about time I make an updated one, especially since I get a lot of questions from all kinds of people about how I make my stop motions, what camera I use, stuff like that. So without further ado, let's get started. So usually the first thing I do when I make a video is I will usually script it, or at least have like a basic outline. So I usually handwrite all of my scripts, but lately I've been experimenting with typing them out on a Google Doc and printing them. So I typically prefer to write them, and I know it's harder and it takes a lot longer, but I typically do this for a number of reasons. One, because I've just done this for so many years and I'm better used to handwriting them rather than printing them in terms of how I time lines in a stop motion and when I know there's enough frames in a particular stop motion. But also because I don't have a very good printer and printing is very tedious and I don't want to do that for every video I have to make. So as you can probably see here, I typically format scripts in a very specific way. For stop motion scripts, I typically just kind of do my own thing. I know this is not how you will set up a screenplay usually, but what I will typically do is I will usually put square brackets around scene changes or actions of a character, and then regular brackets to indicate which character is talking. As you can see, all the character names in this stop motion script are abbreviated and are not written out in full. Sometimes if I'm feeling ambitious when I'm writing a script, I will usually also do a little storyboard or a drawing at the bottom to kind of get an idea where characters are supposed to be in a set. But other times I will just kind of wing it, such as the stop motion you see right here, where I did actually set up the characters almost on the spot. So once I have finished a script and had read it over, I will then begin filming. So I film using a Canon Rebel T7. You can use your phone to make stop motions if you can't afford a camera. I only got my camera after like a year of doing stop motions. I initially, when I first began, used my phone and the app Stop Motion Studio. It is free on the App Store, but there is also a paid version which gives you a bit more features and flexibility. But after, of course, a few years, I preferred the camera because of the more control I had over using a camera versus my phone. So it is typically set to aperture priority setting, though I've also been kind of experimenting with having it on the full manual, so once again I have a bit more control over aperture and shutter speed and stuff like that. I will also usually use a clicker. The clicker I got was from Amazon. It is the Adeline brand, and I got it a while ago. It overall works really well. My only problem is that the Bluetooth remote thing eventually stopped working with my camera, so I just had to have it plugged in all the time when I'm using it, which is a bit annoying sometimes, but it's not really that big of a deal. This particular clicker, what I like is that you can have it both plugged in and use a Bluetooth option. So I typically film my videos in a dollhouse that also has string lights in the back to add extra backlighting. And on top of that, I also will use 2 ring lights on both sides of the doll to add also extra lighting. I got the ring lights from Amazon. You can find some pretty decently cheap options for ring lights, or you can do what I did and just use this clip-on ring light that did not light very well, but it was a good starting point for me when I was first starting out with stop motions. One of the hardest parts of filming a stop motion, other than your dolls falling over after taking like 30 pictures and then having to go back and start over again, it's also just sometimes it can become very tedious to like sit for hours at a time to only be able to film a few seconds of footage. However, what I usually do to make it feel like less tedious is I'll usually watch or listen to something in the background. So it kind of depends on what mood I'm in. I have a specific Amazon Music playlist that I enjoy to listen to while filming. And as for YouTube, I have other playlists of just stuff that gives me inspiration, and makes it a really fun time to film because you can just watch movies and not feel bad about it. So then when it comes to props, when filming I'll make various props such as, for example, the projector board that Michelle is holding. It's made from all kinds of things, and this is the best I could do. This is a piece of fabric with painter's tape kind of taped to. This was the sign from the game show, and then it's taped to this box of magic erasers. So once all of that filming is done, I will then begin the editing process. So I edit on Pinnacle Studio 26. It is an editing software you do have to pay for, but it's not quite as expensive as other editing programs. And I've used Pinnacle for long enough that the price is worth it to me. But there's of course other free programs you can use, such as CapCut, and I think the first one I used before Pinnacle was an editing software called Power Director. It was free, but it did have a giant watermark in the corner that you had to pay like $2.99 to get rid of. So what I do like about Pinnacle though is that I can import all my stop motion frames from my video and turn it into like an actual stop motion video. So the first step I usually do when I'm editing something is importing all my frames. As you can see in this clip, I have like 4,000 frames for like a 5-minute video, and it's a lot. I usually divide my video typically by scene and will import and rough cut things as I go along, so that way I have less stuff to import into Pinnacle Studio. Pinnacle Studio is really good, but sometimes I found that if I have too many stop motion frames, it can get really glitchy and crash. I usually shoot in 15 frames per second. Since I shoot at 15 frames per second, I typically have to put the setting at 30 frames per second, but then have the frame duration be 2. Because Pinnacle Studio, usually the lowest setting of frame rate is 30 frames per second. And this is the equivalent in the stop motion world of shooting on 2s, which means that instead of taking a picture for every movement your doll makes, you take 2 pictures for every movement your doll makes. What this typically does when I'm importing frames is it will duplicate all the frames so that it is 30 frames per second. But I don't have to do any extra filming or work to make it 30 frames per second. So once all of the frames are imported, I'll click on the Save Library button, hope nothing crashes, where if I go into the editing feature, the saved video will be right there. So typically what I'll then do is I'll drag and drop the finished stop motion into my timeline and then export the video. I could just like edit it as is, but I prefer not to, because once again, Pinnacle Studio gets really slow when you try and do that and then it crashes. So I prefer to import the soundless stop motion rough cut as a video and then make a separate timeline where I'll do the final editing of all my scenes. Typically, once I get to the point where all of my scenes, my soundless scenes have been rough cutted, then I will pull up a final project where I'll drag and drop all of my footage. One of the first things I do is I'll sync the voiceover recordings to all of the soundless stop motions, and then also add in music and other fun effects like that. Typically when I add music, I will do it in track 4 and then set it as -26 decibels. When I'm syncing soundless stop motion scenes to the voice recording, I will usually adjust the speed of the clip to make sure it actually lines up with what I'm doing. So if the video happens to be a little bit longer than the audio I recorded, I'll like speed it up. Likewise, if the video is shorter than the actual audio, I'll do a combination of freeze frames and slowing it down. Once I am happy with the video, I export it and once again hope nothing crashes. Okay, so this is the place where I usually do voiceovers. This is the basement inside of storage room. Here's the scripts down there, and then here is the little computer. I have it far out because I'm scared I'm gonna record something and then you can hear my computer like huffing and puffing away in the background. I used to record in my closet, but my closet has stuff in it, and so I can't really do that anymore. So I typically record on Audacity. I usually use this microphone to record things. I quite like it. I couldn't immediately tell you what brand this is, but I did not buy it. My amazing, wonderful brother gave it to me, so thank you letting me borrow your microphone, because it's really nice quality and I really appreciate it. So I use a combination of Canva and Adobe Photoshop to create the thumbnails. That's right, I finally got Photoshop for like, it's been like 5 years and I finally got it. I only began to use Photoshop recently when we needed it for class, so I'm not really comfortable with it yet to use it entirely for my thumbnails. However, it is really great for cropping characters out of an image when I don't feel like doing it painstakingly with Microsoft Paint. For simpler things, I will usually just use Canva, or I'll also use Canva just for adding finishing touches on things and adding the text. For a stop motion thumbnail, I'll usually save a frame or two from the stop motion and then choose the most chaotic scene out of the stop motion to use as the thumbnail. Well, that is everything I have to share with you with the behind the scenes stuff and how I make videos. So if you enjoy this video, make sure you like and subscribe. Very close to 700 subscribers, which is really exciting. Comment below any further questions you have if you have any questions. Thanks so much for watching, and see y'all later!